This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Drinking with Authors, the podcast. I'm your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is the slightly injured C.R. Rice. And our amazing guest today is Connor de Bruler. See, I did it correctly because I made a note. Yay! Okay.
Yay,
Our sponsor today is Skunk Brothers Spirits. We're going to get into that. Let's talk a little bit about what we're drinking. I am drinking out of my Papa Bear cup. Coming soon, news coming soon. I did the cranberry, oh my goodness, and I just lost it. And pomegranate elderberry with the white lightning in it. And it's, I think this may be war. I
was going to say that really, so you don't know, we have been making special drinks for the Four Horsemen. And so we've been coming up with all of them. And my attempts at war have been abysmal. Like nauseating, you choke through them during the podcast. But I think she nailed war.
I think I did. So you're going to have to try this. It is amazing. It's from Skunk Brothers Spirits, the White Lightning, DWA10 coupon code. CR, what are you drinking? Since I know you're allowed to have many, many alcoholic beverages.
Yes. I am drinking Pestilence, which is the green tea and vodka with a little bit, instead of the maraschino cherry juice in it, I did raspberries.
Ooh, super
so fancy. It looks awesome. I'm not allowed to have glass, otherwise I would have a fancy glass too.
Yes, I only have a glass because I stole it from somebody's house. Not going to mention names. Connor, what are you drinking?
Oh, I'm drinking a little Wild Turkey on the rocks in my South Carolina tumbler.
Oh, I like it.
I'm also drinking a Finnish long drink.
Ooh, look how fancy we are today. We're so fancy. Look at us.
So good.
It is. Okay, Connor, so for those that may not know you who are listening, let's talk a little bit about what you write.
Mostly horror fiction. I do have done some hard-boiled detective noir. But the majority is horror fiction with a literary bend. And I did do a Western once that takes place in sort of a post-apocalyptic setting. So that was as far as I went with sci-fi. But horror fiction is probably the easiest.
That sounds fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Some of my favorite genres. When did you start writing?
10 years old. Yeah, around 10 years old. Seriously, probably maybe 16. I started publishing in punk rock zines. And small little horror fiction WordPress sites that people had started up on the internet around the mid 2000s. Yeah.
So what was your first book then?
So the first book published 2012. I was 21 years old. It was a horror novel called Tree Black. It took place in South Carolina and North Carolina. About a trans woman that loses her job because of bigotry. And she goes up to the mountains with her Cherokee boyfriend who just lost his job as a construction worker. And it's sort of a woods or kind of a cabin, queer Evil Dead sort of deal. Deals with a lot of mysticism and legends specific to the North Carolina area. So it did great.
I don't see how it could have possibly, as somebody who grew up in North Carolina, I can't possibly see how that went wrong.
Oh, hey, whereabouts in North Carolina?
Davidson.
Okay, all right. I lived in Charlotte. I lived in Charlotte for about 3 years.
That's terrifying.
Is it?
That's the terrifying part.
Charlotte is so bad now. Like I would never go back to Charlotte. Daytime, absolutely. Nighttime, no.
Yeah, I caught a show there right before the pandemic at the neighborhood theater in Noda, and I think that was the last time I went to Charlotte. Yeah.
Wow.
Erica, since you're in North Carolina now, you need to check out Noda.
Oh, I'm in South Carolina right now.
Well, Erica just moved to North Carolina.
I moved to North
No.
Carolina. I'm in Silva.
Whereabouts in North Carolina? Okay.
I'm in Silva, which is south of
I
Asheville.
love Silva. I spent part of Silva is what inspired Tree Black. I'm not kidding you.
Well,
I
see,
went
now I'm
up
gonna have
there
to
in
read Tree
college.
Black just
Yeah, yeah.
get nice and terrified.
Brevard.
'Cause
The book starts in Greenville, and then when they go up to the mountains, they go up to the Silva and Brevard area, Transylvania County.
oh wow.
Very nice.
I went hiking there with some friends maybe a year before I started writing that book. And also that's where I last saw an uncle of mine. So that was kind of the setting that I wanted, the creepy.
Like last saw
setting.
like he went missing, or last saw like you just haven't seen him in a while?
Last saw alive.
Okay.
That's still
Like,
ominous. The way that
I was about to
just
say,
said
but
is
like
still ominous.
Unfortunately,
because of horror
it's not.
stuff.
No, unfortunately, it's not
Oh.
ominous. It's just very sad. So we don't have to go there if you don't want to. But
No, it's just the way as a storyteller, you just laid that out very, very well into an ominous, and it's in the mountains.
Unfortunately, no, it was just a very sad situation. But he wanted to hike from Nottahala Valley up in Pisgah, and my dad and I dropped him off there. And then a year later, I went hiking there, and I was like, oh, wow, man, I got to put this into a story.
That's very cool. So how did you publish that first book?
So I publish most of my stuff with a small press that's based out in California. They're in Oakland. They're called Montauk Press. And they mostly publish dystopian science fiction. And I guess I was just lucky enough to convince them, to do something a little more organic and woodsy and not so cyberpunky.
That's very, very cool. So did you take a lot of time to research the legends here, or did you grow up knowing them from your family, or where did you get the legends that spark some of the horror parts of your books?
Most of it was research. My family is not originally from the South, even though I grew up here. So, it was all word of mouth research. A lot of it was, when I say word of mouth, I used to go, I don't know if you know what contra dancing is.
No.
It's kind of a hippie scene. And I used to go down to the River Falls Shack, and it's kind of like line dancing, but it's a little older English style. And a lot of college kids and older hippies from Appalachia would come down and they played bluegrass music and you dance. And it was a way to meet people. But, there were these young college kids, and then there were these older, like, moonshiny kind of prospector types that would hang out too with their wives, and they'd sell like organic squash and things on the side, and you'd get stories from them. They'd be the ones to tell you. The other is, researching just the different Native American legends, specifically Cherokee to the area, visiting the Museum of the Cherokee Indian in Cherokee, North Carolina. Just kind of, it's a mix of, oh man, that's a great story, I gotta cannibalize that for a book, and and Wikipedia articles, to be completely honest. It's a fine mix.
Yeah, we used to all make fun of Wikipedia, but I'll tell you, they have some actual good information in the last few years. People have done right by some of those Wikipedia sites, at least for, knowledge on some of these things like that. Yeah. So how many books have you, and let's start with how many books have you released then?
Let's see, with Montauk, 7, and I think 12 in all.
Did you self-publish the other ones?
Yeah, I did. I self-published a few short story collections when I was still in college. And I, as a means to keep a copyright on a screenplay, I self-published it as a Kindle book, because it was faster than submitting it for a copyright. So it's on there, you can buy it. No, you wouldn't, who wants to read a screenplay? But, that was one way to get a copyright quickly.
That's That's very cool. So what made you decide you wanted to be a writer though, to do this? Because that's a lot of work, that many books and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's how well, it's, it's wrapped up in my identity at this point. It's, how I see myself. I've always wanted to be, I've always wanted to write full time. That hasn't panned out so far, but I've tried really hard. I'm not the best at self-promotion. Learning by doing, starting really young. It's my authentic self. It's like Zadie Smith said, writing is the best self. I'm real socially awkward with people, and I don't always interact with my immediate family as well as I could, but when I write, I feel like I am exactly who I am. So those who would read a book of mine would get the full story. And I was always just artistic kid. I just wanted to do something artistic, and started out with painting abstracts because I fell in love with Pollock when I was a little kid. And then around 10, I was like, I should write, I should start writing. And I was, writing little stories and then publishing in punk rock zines in high school that no one saw except a few incarcerated people who contacted me for them. For some reason, and I don't know why, I made a little zine of one of my short stories. It was my first self-publishing endeavor in college, and it was just a short story, and I made a little printer paper booklet of it, and I registered it with this punk rock zine outlet in Tennessee. And I basically said, I'll give it to you for free. You just need to contact me and you'll get it. A couple months later, I get a letter in the mail at the college I'm attending from this very polite person who was incarcerated in some state prison in the Finger Lakes area of New York. And he was like, hey, this story sounds really cool. Can I get a copy? And I had to send him one without staples.
Yeah, no, I would.
What was he in prison for?
He didn't say, and I didn't ask. No, I would assume something very silly like drug charges, something you shouldn't have been incarcerated for, but you never know.
No, that's true.
That's who likes my stuff, I guess.
I have a huge fan.
It's a big populace
on people who are locked up. That is actually a very confined group of people that you can have there.
It's a captive audience.
Yes, very much so. One of the things you mentioned was that the lead character of your first book was trans.
Mm-hmm.
Are most of your books set with an LGBTQ?
Most of them, not all of them, but most of them, yeah.
I think that's awesome because it's part of what's has own voice and bringing stuff, especially horror stories. What has the feedback been like for you on those stories with that?
So the feedback, which has been very minimal, has not been a lot, but what little there has been has been overwhelmingly positive. I've been really, really, really lucky to have, there's not many reviews out there of my stuff, but what reviews there are, they're always really, really glowing. So yeah, I'm very fortunate in that sense. So there's something there that some people like. I don't think I've ever had any really deep criticisms. I guess the form of criticism that I've received has just been the standard rejections. 90% of everything I send out comes back, and that's normal. That's part of the business. So I consider that to be like a criticism, but I have not gotten any bad reviews yet. And when they come, that's fine. But so far people seem to like something a little more intense, a read that's a little bit darker, in the vein of some of Stephen King or Joe R. Lansdale's heavier stuff. Jack Ketchum is a big influence for me, the late Jack Ketchum. The people that like that stuff, the ones who have read my stuff, they're very nice. So I'm very, very happy.
That's
What made
very
you
cool.
want to?
Go ahead.
What made you want to do horror instead of something like a thriller or like a mystery, or like you said before, you did like a dark detective?
I have done that. My most recent book that just came out, the short story collection, is all hard-boiled noir that takes place in the South. But the thing that got me interested in horror early on was, in horror, it's still what they consider speculative fiction. It's in the realm of fantasy. But I noticed that in horror, your characters didn't have to be space captains or magical fairies. They could be Joe that works at the garage. And you could still have that fantasy element, but all your characters are extremely grounded in realism. So there's a high potential in horror for realism. And most of horror starts in the realm of real, even if it's like a slasher with a bunch of college kids in a van going to a cabin, that's a real thing. We've all been in that van and then made horror movie jokes subsequently.
It's like, I always think of the commercial. Have you ever seen the commercial where they're like running and the guy is chasing after them and they're like, where do we go? And they're like, the shed full of chase-ons. And she's like, but what about the running car? They're like, no, that's
Geico
ridiculous.
commercials. They did great with those because
that's what I think of.
Geico is a car insurance company that wants to be a sketch comedy show, it seems to me. The amount
what
of
you
money.
remember the commercials though, so that's the whole point in advertising is, do you remember the commercials?
Yeah, the cute lizard and all the puns and Geico.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to NPR once, and they had a story with George Saunders, the short story writer, and apparently one of his short stories inspired the Geico caveman ads.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, 100%. It was a short story of George Saunders, and I'm gonna sound terrible. I can't remember the short story collection. It was 12 After Midnight, I think, was the name of the short story collection. It was one of or it might have been Civil War Land and Decline. But one of those inspired the Geico caveman directly.
Wow. That's very cool. So how did you find your publishing company?
I was just looking around. The idea when I was, finishing high school, starting college, and not wanting to go to college and not studying anything I was interested in. I was just looking. The idea that to have a physical book with my name on it, just seemed it seemed too much to ask of the world. I didn't think I was smart enough or intelligent enough or worthy enough to have that that gift. And then I started finding that you don't have to have an agent in the beginning. There's a lot of small presses. I started looking at different small presses that were publishing horror and other things, and there were a lot of them, and some of them are still around. Grindhouse Press, Bizarro Press, Bloodbound Books. I mean, there's a lot of small companies, and this publishing house, which has since published a lot of interesting dystopian fiction, zombie fiction, comedies. They published a wide gamut of interesting things. They hadn't made anything yet. They were completely green, and I sent them the pitch for, hey, I wrote this woodsy Southern horror novel. Is this good enough? And they, it was one of my non-rejections. It was a yes. And I've been publishing with them for 10 years now, it seems.
That's very cool.
That's awesome.
So you were published pre-pandemic, and we're going to touch on that. We have to take a quick break, and we'll be right back because I want to talk about meeting people in person. Okay, we'll be right back with Drinking with Authors.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family owned, brewing small batch grain to bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
We're back having the great shopping cart debate of socialism. So you've been publishing for 10 years. So you were published pre-pandemic. Did you go to conventions or anywhere to, no, I like that violent head shaking. How come you didn't go
is that violent head shaking?
Yeah, like you're like.
No, I never did. I've never done a signing. I've done some. Any advertising was usually over the internet. No, never.
How come you haven't taken your books to like a horror convention or something?
I don't really like that scene. Don't get me wrong. I think it's great. You know, I'd love to meet Michael Berryman and I would have liked to have met Gunnar Hansen before he passed away, who was also a great novelist. But it's I just I kind of went with the Jandek JD Salinger business model for a long time. I just put my books out there and I assumed that the people who needed them would find them. And maybe that's true and maybe it's not. But only recently I've kind of come out of my shell, so to speak, and decided that, this is maybe something I would want to do for a living, because everything else has taken a pretty severe toll on me, it seems. So.
Well, maybe we'll talk offline about.
I'm going to drag you somewhere, dude.
Yeah.
Or become BFFs.
Sure.
She drags me to conventions, so I feel like
that is true.
I gotta pass the torch.
Yeah,
they're an exciting thing. They're very scary. I did my first one last year. It's weird. It's definitely something that pulls you out of your shell. And it's surprising how many people actually want to see your face.
Yeah. So I've been to Heroes Convention in Charlotte. My ex-wife used to have a booth there. She's an artist. And her friends are also artists, so I would support them, and I'd go to those conventions, and I met some people there, but it was never to promote my stuff. It was just to be there and be a moral support for her and her friends.
Yeah, no, it has to be for you. That's where we need to get you, so that you're doing it for you, because that's how you get in front of people and they find you. I have to say, is part of the thing. As much as we'd like people to be able to find you on the internet and stuff, and there's lots of ways you can do it if you're super antisocial for doing stuff, but I think horror conventions, horror fans are a really unique bunch of people. They actually are, even in relation to other fandoms.
Yeah. I read bloodydisgusting.com, and I love that. And I watch the history of horror and things like that. I don't keep posters on my wall and things like that, but I admire that subculture that it's spawned, and really friendly, warm, kind people involved in that in a really deep way. I think that's why Gunnar Hansen sort of started doing that circuit toward the end of his life. He kind of tried to run away for a little bit from being Leatherface, because that's not how he saw himself. He was a very serious poet and novelist, and then I think toward the end of his life he was like, these people really genuinely care for this work that you've done. I'm going to go ahead and do these circuits. And I think he, according to him at least, in interviews, he had a blast.
I think meeting your fans, you've gotten letters, it sounds like, or possibly emails and stuff, but actually having somebody come up to you with that excitement about your book or about your character, like but it's a whole level. And
should have saw me.
Yeah. CR tried to avoid it at all costs, but the fact of the matter is that the fans want to see the person that generated a story that they care about, and talk to them about this story or those characters or things like that. It means the world to them. And, we've gone from a society where a writer can be in a cabin in the woods and, send their manuscript via carrier pigeon and get out there. That's just not how it works anymore. There's so much, media out there and so much put in their faces and so many people talking about their work that you can't just hope that somebody finds it, especially if you want a career. If you don't want a career and it's just a side thing and it's sort of I don't want to say a hobby, but something you do that's not, your mainstay, then you can absolutely do that. But if you want it to be something, you have to get out in front of the humans, my friend, and interact with them.
Yeah.
Alcohol helps.
That's true.
To a certain degree.
I will say, most of the time you can't drink in the convention, but nobody has any rules about the parking lot. So, and if you have very good friends, sometimes you can get smuggled in.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And you make great connections. Like half the time, the people you meet there, the other authors, they're the ones that are like, it pulls you out because they're so over the top. I think you would have a lot of fun. We could perhaps kidnap you, a fun little kidnap situation, and implant you in a situation like that. I think you would have fun.
Maybe 10 minutes after it begins. Yeah, sure.
Hey, it doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes after it begins. If you can find your tribe and you can find your people. So let's talk about that for a minute. Do you have like a writers group, or are you solo, or?
No, I've never had a writers group. In fact, I think there's only one other writer that I think I've ever talked to. And he left a very, very nice review for one of my books. And I blurbed one of his books that was also very, very good. Shout out to Mr. Jesse McKinnell. He's also published by Montauk Press. And I've worked really closely. Working closely is a bit of an overstatement. There's a very, very kind filmmaker from Maryland who adapted one of my short stories into a film festival submission, I would say. It got honorable mention. And it was really fun to talk with him only over the phone, of course. And he's actually doing really awesome. He has some awesome content on YouTube, Mr. Sam Lichtman.
Very cool.
But no, I never worked with any other writers. I never had a writers group. I've never shown my work in progress other than to family and close friends.
Is that by choice, or? Like,
not really. I could never find any. I was just always alone in that endeavor. I never really found a group to hang with.
Did you do your creative writing and stuff in college at all?
No, I did all that alone in my dorm, separately from everything else I was working on. But I will say this: I wrote for the school newspaper. I have a mass comm degree from a university in Rock Hill called Winthrop. Mm-hmm. And that was a lot of fun doing journalism in college. I went into the office and was like, what's easy? What can you pass really, really quickly with? And they said, well, if you cram a business, degree, you could get a business degree in 3 years if you cram. The other one is journalism, because you're not going to be writing anything that's longer than 500 words. Usually there's no big essays or long reading. And I thought that's perfect, because then I can just slide through school and get it over with and do what I want to do in my free time.
That makes sense. What about, so with the publishing house, what was it like getting your work edited the first time?
I'm trying to remember the name of the editor. She only worked for them for a little bit. She was fantastic. It was so much fun. I think some people get a little butthurt sometimes. It's like, you don't really understand how sentences work, do you? No, but I thought it was a blast, because she wasn't just editing, to make it more grammatically correct. She was editing it in a way that would make it more fun for the reader. And then the scenes that weren't something she wanted to edit, paragraph that she thought was perfect as is, she would say so. She was so warm and kind, and she really gave me some confidence. She's like, this scene was great. And I don't get that kind of feedback usually. So I was like, I love editing. This is great,
That's very cool. What about your cover art? Where did that come from?
So they've always provided really fantastic cover art, and they'll give you 2 or 3 options. They'll kind of brainstorm and throw it on the table. It could look like this, it could look like this, and you kind of whittle it down to what you think looks most badass.
Very cool. And how far is their reach? So as far as publishing, are they in, I'm assuming Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Do you have audiobooks for your books?
No, not yet. What I've been doing some of my own independent audio stuff, where I've been reading my work on YouTube and sort of putting it out as these, they're short stories, but no, I haven't had the pleasure of having a full audiobook production. One day that would just be so stellar. I would love to hear that.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So what are you working on right now?
So so I have a new book coming out in maybe 2 or 3 months. It's a crime fiction book called Hollow Bible. I just finished writing a horror novel. Pure horror, takes place in coastal South Carolina. It's called Hell, South Carolina. And that's not under any contract or anything. It's just an old manuscript I have on me. And I've actually been interested in trying to find an agent it's a longer work. It's a little out of step with what the small press I've been working with usually does. And I've been just doing that. And then the other day I started writing, I'm not even sure what it's going to be yet, if it's going to be a novella or a short story.
How do you start your stories? What inspires you? You talked about the first one, but like, as I make notes all the time, different things inspire me. I write horror, so it's usually real life events, and then I twist them in my mind, of course, to how they're going to go wrong. But where do you get your inspiration from?
It's a flash in the pan that you catch and you expound on. So it's usually, it usually doesn't come to me full. I don't have if I start working on something, I don't have a plot synopsis yet. I don't know what the characters will be like. I find that you figure that out in the first draft. You shape the story in the first draft. You write your knowledge into the story. And but what it usually happens is, once you've kind of built up enough life, you've built up enough time. You've been thinking about things, they can be like, I was reading about sodium vapor lamps the other week, really minutia, and you start to build, I could, I like that word, I like that idea, I like that mood. And you kind of build yourself up to the confidence of starting the story. And it usually happens with, okay, I'm going to start it now. I feel like I have enough there. It usually starts with, to me, it starts really abstractly. It's a mood. There has to be a mood there first. And once I have that mood to expound off of, it's almost like alchemy. The characters come out of the mood. It usually solidifies within the first 3 sentences. And then you have the template for, okay, I know what kind of story this is going to be. I know who this character is going to turn into. And that morphs throughout the work. And after that, the inspiration's over. After that, you're done. You don't get it back. And then from there, it becomes logic. It becomes work. It becomes connecting these disparate ideas into a cohesive idea. And then as the pages come out, your critical brain forms what the narrative should be, where the narrative has to come from. In that process, I'm not always 1,000% confident that I even have a fantastic grip on narrative structure. There's times where I've questioned whether or not I could write for TV or write for a movie or something, because the narrative structure presents itself to me rather than something I impose. And it's sometimes has to do with something as profound as what the character's emotional reaction to a specific situation will be that creates the so then flow of the story. And other times it can be as minuscule as finding the right word, finding the right phrase to enter into one sentence after another.
That makes
So
sense.
do you start at chapter 1 and write your way through?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So do I. There are those of us
Insanity.
that do that, Chelsea. I know you don't even start anywhere and maybe in the same book you're writing. So true story.
My writing
What
style
about-
is called chaos.
It is absolute chaos. What about Story Graveyard? Do you start on this sort of adventure of writing the story and then find it just dies? Or do you always finish?
I think when I was younger, I had some things that fell to the wayside. But I've found that it's all about persistence. You're not going to be inspired every day. A lot of the time writing is kind of a drudgery. It's not always magical. You're not always completely happy to do it. But sometimes you change your own mind in the writing process. I sit down and I'm like, oh, this book sucks. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, wait a minute. And then 3, 4, 5 sentences, I'm back. I know what's going on now. Here we go. And sometimes, and then you do have, and this is a real thing, you can sit around for days and be like, well, I've hit the wall. I don't know what's going to happen next. And then it comes to you. Of course, that's the next step. You have breakthroughs. And then, but that's what the second draft is for, is making it look like I knew what I was doing the whole time. But yeah, every single book is the first book. Every time I start working on something, it's like, oh boy, I don't know what I'm doing. Here goes nothing. And sometimes you always start, I hate to bring him up, but it can't do much. Cormac McCarthy, in the one interview he gave with Oprah, he said, you always start out with this idea of the perfect thing. and you never quite get there. And that's kind of true. But I also noticed that when you start off, David Foster Wallace, who I don't care for, said the same thing. Your book is always more grandiose and intense and sweeping in your head. And then when you sit down, the sobering effect of sitting down and writing shows you how disconnected your inner thoughts really are. And the only thing that's going to connect them to make a narrative that a reader can follow and enjoy is just slow daily work. It's a daily thing. You write every single day, sometimes a page, sometimes a paragraph, and it gets there, in Lamont, bird by bird.
Agreed. How long does it generally take you to write a novel?
6 months to a year. So the book I just finished that, is just a manuscript sitting in a hard drive is 60,000, a little over 60,000 words, a standard novel. I'd say maybe a year and 2 months. During the very beginning of the pandemic, I wrote 2 books back to back in 5 months because I was initially unemployed and I had all the time in the world to write, and I did. I was very happy that I was able to use that. So it depends.
Do you write series?
No.
Okay.
No. I like, and I don't have a problem with series at all. I like each individual story, each individual book to be its own self-contained universe, its own artifact. That's just an aesthetic choice that I like. I've read series and I enjoy series, but I've not tried to spend time with any of these characters for more than is necessary. And sometimes you like them, and sometimes it's like, well, it's over now. It's time for them to leave, and I need to meet new people. The story I started 2 days ago, I was just thinking, this is going to be a short little story. It'll be like 3,000 words. And about 4 pages in, I was like, I really like these guys. I'm not ready to let go yet. I might be in for a full novella. This might be a novel now, a series. It depends on how much you wish these characters really existed so you could hang out with them and drink a couple beers.
That's very true. Okay, Chelsea, I'm going to give you the final question before we have to wrap up.
That was my big question, though.
That was it? Do you want me to take the final question?
That was my big one. Yes, I've been itching to ask that question.
I love that you're holding your mouth. That's a story.
I'm trying not to smile.
Don't laugh. Don't laugh. None of this is funny. Just kidding. It's all funny. So final question for you. What would be your ideal life if you could decide your writing career? What would that look like?
If I could decide my writing career, what would it look like? I would be able to afford a mid-range apartment or townhouse. I would have a car, and I would be able to take a vacation once a year, and I would have enough money to occasionally shop at Whole Foods. So that would
Just
be
to say you did it. I like it.
That's a whole level up right there. The shopping at Whole Foods, man.
Yeah, that would be if I could be financially stable with a small apartment and a nice car meaning one that runs, and I could shop at Whole Foods instead of Aldi once a week, I would have exceeded my wildest dreams writing.
Okay.
Makes sense, my friend. Okay, shameless self-promotion time. What is the book that just was released?
So it's called Return of the Death God. It's 13 stories. Only one of them, the title story, Return of the Death God, is supernatural. The rest are hard-boiled noir or just plain literary realism.
Very cool. And then how do people find you? Like your website and Facebook and stuff.
So I don't have a Facebook. I don't have a website. I'm on
Oh, Connor, my
Goodreads.
friend,
Connor,
we're gonna talk.
We're gonna have a talk in this.
Yeah, we're gonna talk as soon as we're
We
done
got you,
with this
buddy.
podcast.
I have a Goodreads, and you could buy Return of the Death God from really just about any place that sells books: Barnes and Noble, Amazon, thrift books, Alibris. There's some. I found it on some Japanese websites. I found it on Swedish and Australian websites. Anywhere you prefer to buy books, it is on there. Just Return of the Death God by Connor de Bruler.
Very cool. It has been terrible amounts of fun to have you on this podcast, my friend.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, we're going to talk about shameless self-promotion, and hopefully when we broadcast this, we can add your shameless self-promotion to the episode notes. So pay attention for that, fans out there. This has been Drinking with Authors. I've been your host, Erica Lance. My co-host has been the only slightly injured C.R. Rice. Our guest today has been Connor de Bruler. I said that correctly again. Our sponsor has been Skunk Brothers Spirits. DWA10 is the coupon code, and we will see you guys next time.